This is Christian Book Blurb, brought to you by author and songwriter Matt McChlery. Get a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the lives of some of your favourite Christian authors, hear about their books and faith. Also, why not check out my website, mattmcclery.com. Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the Christian Book Blurb, where we like to encourage you in your discipleship one book at a time, as we meet some amazing Christian authors and learn about their books, their lives and their faith. I'm your host, Matt McChlery. Thanks for joining me. And on today's show, I'm going to be talking about reclaiming masculinity with the author, Matt Fuller. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's really great that you've been able to join us today. You've written a book. We'll sort of dig down into the book a little bit later on, but let's just touch on some of the more general themes that your book addresses, and that is masculinity and what it means to be a man. What is it about masculinity, do you think, that needs to be reclaimed?
Oh, yeah, so we went for reclaiming in the end. I started daydreaming about this and writing this. In our church setting, there's a spread of ages, but there'd be a lot in the sort of 18 to 30 age range. And I realised that just chatting to younger guys, they didn't really know what it meant to be a bloke or a man. They didn't know what they're allowed to say. They felt nervous entering the arena, felt a little bit like they should just be apologising for being a man, full stop. And I sort of observed this, and then I think the thing that really catalysed it was in London, in the murder of Sarah Everard, horrifically at the hands of Wayne Couzens, the policeman. And that really unsettled lots of the young women at church. I mean, really unsettled them, because they really could see themselves in her, and generated lots of discussion. But also in the newspapers, this is the secular press. I kept reading, we must educate young men to know what it means to be a man. And then that was it. It's like, well, what are you going to say? Classic one journalist, if I remember right, reading him, observing, I got sons and daughters. To my daughters, I say, you can be anything in life. You can be just as good, if not better than the men. And to my sons, I say, I don't know what I meant to say. I'm a 45-year-old bloke. You'd have thought I'd have worked it out by now. But I've got nothing to say, observed the journalist. And I just thought, oh, hold on a minute. Let me go back to the Bible and spend a bit of time working hard, as far as I'm able to, on what it does say about being a man, vis-a-vis being a woman, which is some, but not loads. I mean, most discipleship is for male and female. And then let me just try and put that in language for the 21st century. So in many ways, I think what I've written here, the guts of it, the theology of it, probably could have been written at any point in the last 2,000 years. But what does that look like in particularly the 21st century West? That's what I was trying to do. And why reclaim? Because masculinity is basically a bit of a dirty word, isn't it? You can shove toxic masculinity into Amazon as a search box, and oh my goodness, there are so many books with that in the title or subtitle, and confusion, real confusion. And it doesn't go away, does it? Have you seen Barbie yet? You're the sort of man who gets dragged to see Barbie.
I said to my wife, I'd better see the Barbie movie before I do this interview. I haven't
you failed.
To see it yet.
Good man. Well, likewise, I thought I'm not particularly fussed about going to see this. I'm not anything anti, but there's some films you want to see on a big screen, and some you can really wait until they're.
I have read articles about it though, and talking about how the sort of the male characters are, as you say, portrayed in a way that are incredibly emasculating, very weak and downtrodden, and well, what's the point of you really, type thing. But I'm only saying that based on articles. I haven't watched it myself.
There we go. Don't worry. I mean, because there's part of it is a hoot. It's funny in parts, and Ryan Reynolds is, as everyone says, he does steal the show. He is hilarious, but in one sense, it's quite miserable. Because you start off in Barbie Land, the women are in charge, and the men don't even have. They are nothing and don't even have anywhere to sleep at night. They just all have to sleep on the beach. It's one, Barbie's asked at one point, "Where do all the Kens sleep?" She said, "Oh, I don't know. I've never even thought about it. They're so unimportant." Then, of course, the Kens take over and sort of introduce the patriarchy and push down the women. And then, in the end, the women reclaim their place and push the men back down. Hurrah! And you think, oh, so what are we meant to do with that? You've presented this battle of the sexes. I mean, there's some really shrewd observations, some poignant moments, but in the end, this is a zero-sum game. Either men win or women win, but that's it. Oh,
and either imbalance isn't great.
No, so okay, you can't ask too much of a film such as that. But part of why it's so popular, of course, is it is addressing these issues. I think lots of women love it because it expresses their wrestling. Again, what is Ken supposed to do? And he can't quite work it out. In the end, he says, "Oh, I don't like being in charge. Can you be in charge again, please?" But what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? We're so clueless. So I thought I'd have a go at writing at least one half of the equation.
I must say, and just for someone listening, and we discussed the Barbie movie there, but your book in no way berates women.
I hope not.
It's not. Men are better than women, and women should know their place, and all. It's certainly not that at all. I really enjoyed it. It was a great exploration of what the Bible teaches about being a man. And the other thing I really appreciated about it for me personally, because I'll tell you a story. My sister does listen to the podcast, so I might get a phone call after he listens to this episode. But she gave me a book once by a famous author, and I won't say who it is. And he was quite renowned for writing books for men and all the rest. And he's got quite a popular book in Christian circles. Men should read this type thing. So she very kindly thought of me, bought me the book for my birthday. I said, "Thank you very much. I've heard of this author. I've heard of this book. It should be very good." I didn't get past the introduction because in the introduction it was just, if you're a man, you should be climbing mountains. You should be skinning bears. You should be, jumping off cliffs with your loincloth and, making Tarzan noises. And that, come on, men, why aren't we doing this? And I just thought, well, you know what? I am a man, and I don't like climb mountains and skin bears and all this stuff, so this book isn't actually going to speak very much to me, so I didn't carry on reading it. But your book is great because you admit when you generalize, and you're very upfront about that, which I appreciate. But equally, it isn't all about mountain climbing and all that kind of stuff, so I appreciate that. So thank you.
What are the one biblical text I found really that arrested me in that regard, just on what you've just said, which is not really about the subject per se, but in 1 Thessalonians 2, Paul is talking about how he's related to the Thessalonian church and his care for them and his how much he invested in them and loved them. And I think I was really struck. He said, like a father I exhorted you, and like a mother I nurtured you. It's a sort of breastfeeding word. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Paul is quite content to say, I acted in this way, which is a bit more male, the exalting. And I treated you also in this way, which is a bit more motherly, female, which is the nurturing. And I did both. So he can say, it's two things there, do you see? One, some things are a bit more male, and some things are a bit more female. But here I am as a bloke, the Apostle Paul, and I did both of those things. So it's really fascinating that he can make those generalizations and say, I did a bit of both. But let's be honest about it. That's a bit more of a fatherly thing. That's a bit more of a motherly thing. And isn't that interesting? And so I take it that, look, you and I don't know one another well, but if you and I managed to live out as best we're able the most godly Matt Fuller, Matt McChlery's, that we could possibly be, to conform to the image of Christ. We'd still look different as men. How I'm
Yeah.
acting as a man might still be slightly different to you. Um, but there are some generalizations that the Bible makes, some normative expectations that we can look to. There are some patterns that are more obviously male and more obviously female. And how do those manifest in the 21st century in the UK or the West, you might say? Because it's going to look a bit different if you're a Christian man in the UK as if you're a
Wow.
Christian man in Namibia. It's going to look slightly
And
different.
and especially around this whole topic of gender.
Yeah.
I mean, that's discussion and debate and issues around gender have become so prominent, haven't they, recently?
Well, yeah.
Especially in our Western culture. So, what do you do with yourself if you're a normal guy? What do you do? Where do you go?
Yeah.
So this book is really helpful.
And I think also that if you say nothing, and if the church says nothing, and if Christians say nothing, young men in particular will look elsewhere. And so, I mean, it is staggering the number of hits and views that Andrew Tate had for his videos, which is a sort of gross caricature, hyper masculinity.
Yeah.
To be a man, you must have lots of really fast cars and treat women pretty badly, is his, of course, selling point. But if no one's saying anything, lots of young men are going, well, I guess it's that, is it? Because no one else is telling me what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
So you can't have a vacuum or it'll get filled with some pretty strange characters like him.
So how does the Bible help us to get a more positive understanding of masculinity?
Well, let me give you a sense. In one sense, the nuance is where it becomes interesting, and that's why it's a book. But if I was to give you a sentence, I think it's a biblical Christianity. It's strength, courage, leadership in the service of others. You could even simplify it. Maybe strength in the service of others, but to broaden strength, courage, leadership in the service of others. And the second half is where it becomes Christian. If you just have strength, courage, leadership, I think that's lots of cultures throughout history, and taken to an excess, of course, that's where it's toxic. But if you put those things in the service of others, if Christ is the model, so of course, in the book, look at some of the obvious passages, Genesis 2 and Ephesians 5. What does it mean for the husband to be the head of the wife? Scream! In the 21st century, but there's lots of detail you can say on those things. Lots of things it goes right or wrong. But if it is like Christ, of course, it's sacrifice. It's leading to it's sacrificial leadership. It's sacrificial strength.
Yeah.
It's I'm doing this for your good, not mine.
And I love what you say about strength in your book as well. That men shouldn't be afraid of their strength, but to use it properly, to use it for what God has given you for, which is to use your strength to protect, as you've already said. I think that's really important, and then that brings in the element of the other person, doesn't it? You're protecting others, and that's a role that God has given us.
Yeah, that's right. I think I spent a couple of chapters on this, don't I? The one, there's the sort of protecting the truth, protecting the church, that sort of fundamental role that's given to throughout the Bible, starting from Adam. That's his role to tend and protect the garden. You get the same language. The Levitical priests are to tend and protect the tabernacle and then the temple. And into the New Testament, elders are to be the primary ones who protect the church against heresy. So there's that sense. And then a slightly harder to pin down sense of using strength in the service of women more generally. And I think that the chapter I was sort of most nervous of, it probably, or I can't remember quite the language I used, but I suggest it a little more tenuously, is a chapter on chivalry, which I used as a word.
Yes. I liked that chapter, I must say.
Oh, good, good. I used it because, of course, it's a completely outdated word that no one ever uses. So
Yeah.
it seemed slightly safer than some, but this sense of from the who cares to do you hold open a door for a woman or not? And again, I've had guys slightly get themselves into knots about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what does it mean? And it's interesting here in London. There's this much derided campaign that started about a month, 6 weeks ago. So Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has got all these posters up, which is, if your friends are being sexist, why don't you just say to them, mate? And there's an M with about 5 A's and then a TE. And it's derided is because, who, mate, and there are even some adverts on the radio as well. It sounds a bit like a sheep barring. But it's fascinating. They're basically saying, hey, if there's just sort of low-level sexism, you should do something about that. And sort of as Christians, you'd want to say, well, yeah, of course. Of course you should. You should use your strength to say, friend, brother, if it's a Christian, that's not okay. That's really not okay. And classic, you're on a bus, and maybe a young woman's getting a hassle from a couple of guys. Of course, in the 21st century, perhaps the default setting is to say, "Oh, it's none of my business. I'm just not getting involved." It takes some courage to say, "Guys, I don't think she wants your attention," or probably more. Sorry, are you okay with? Just checking you're okay. I don't want to intervene. No, actually, I'm uncomfortable with these two guys. Now, that's courage. I mean, it's low level, or maybe slightly higher if you're small and they're two 7-foot giants. But what I think there is just that sense of using strength in the service of others, strength to protect. That's don't do it if it's you versus a whole bus. You might maybe grab the person in trouble and run. But yeah.
Yeah. So your book then, it's called Reclaiming Masculinity, and you focus on 7 principles of what it means to be a godly man. And of course we can't cover them all here. We've already elaborated on a couple of them. But there's just one I think is quite important for us to address. Is that on friendship? That was a surprising chapter to find, but then as I read it, I was nodding my head going, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. This is really important. So why do you think it's so difficult for men, or Christian men in particular, to make and maintain close friendships?
I don't think Christian men are worse than any others. I think often they're much better. I think we certainly should be better. There's there's extraordinary amount of secular work done on this now because of the oft quoted statistic that lots of men in their 40s have no friends. Childhood friends, maybe university friends, maybe friends from when they were young and single, and they were part of a larger gang. They sort of dissipate, and lots of guys can invest in work and family, and that's it. There's some other things. I mean, again, we're into the realm of generalizations. Sorry, but sometimes men can be a little slower to move beyond the banal. A little slower to talk about what's really going on, and therefore not connect on a deep level. Sometimes, yeah.
Do you think social media has damaged the way that we try and connect, or should connect with each other on a more deeper friendship level?
It can do. It depends if you get confused. So if you confuse online connections with friendships, then you're in trouble. Hey, so you've seen this in the book. I construct. I mean, this is very well known, actually, if you start reading some of the literature about this. And I'd never encountered this before, but people phrase it different ways. But the research is pretty similar. That if you think of an archery target or a dartboard, in the center, close friend, in the center, you might call companions, say. Most people only ever have 2 or 3. And in that's those that when something goes well, when something goes badly in your life, you instantly tell. Close friends, maybe 10. And then beyond that, so a wider circle, maybe 40, 50. And then beyond that, acquaintances, you can have hundreds. But people get confused. They think, I got friends because they're in contact with 100 people. But no one knows if they're up or down, really. So it's the confusion of categories. And all are good. It's good to have lots of connections and lots of sort of random friends that you enjoy their company, but you don't make a huge effort to see.
You need the deep, the 1 or 2 deep
some
friendships as well.
You need some. And you've got to be realistic. You can't carry more than 2 or 3 people with you through life, I don't think, in terms of friendships, because just life is busy. But some, if your world drops out tomorrow, who are you going to call? And if there's no one, well, I have a think about investing and being a little bit deliberate. And I may be a slightly older vintage to you. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think there's many in, let's say, 40s or even 50s. There aren't many guys. If you say, do you know what, I just love your company and I wish we'd spend a little more time catching up with one another. I don't think there are many who are going to say, I got too many friends. There are going to be some, but not many. But you can't do that on your, you can't be odd about it. You need to actually know someone well enough to say, let's hang out a bit more. But
Well, that's really
but Christians, I think, have got the resources to do this better than others.
Okay.
Because we know we fall short. So you enter a friendship saying, I'm going to be a friend, but I'm going to fall short. And you expect your friends to fall short. And so you can forgive alongside that as well. We know that the other person screws up. So when they tell us they've screwed up, it's okay. That we don't have to pretend that we've got everything sorted because we know we haven't. So there are resources just inherent in being a Christian, knowing that we're forgiven sinners, that should enable us to go a bit deeper in friendships. Whether we do or not, well.
Yeah, that's true. We are going to have a short break in just a moment, but just before we do, what advice can you give some Christian men who are listening on how we can live our lives well as godly men? And also, equally, what advice could you give women who are listening as to how can you help your partner or your good friend around you to be the best man that they can be?
I may pull them together. Guys and spouses or sisters of guys, you really want your husbands or mates or brothers or whoever they may be, you want them, sons, you want them to have Christian friends who spur them on to be like Christ. That you really want that. So let me go simple. Guys, you want a few who are going to really spur you on to be like Christ. I think I include in the book somewhere. I'm a vicar. I go to lots of weddings. Take you to lots of weddings. I think the nicest speech I ever heard was years ago. I mean, it's a naff line. I'm surprised no one else has used it. But the best man said, "Thank you for having me as your best man today, but thank you much more for making me a better man. Your friendship has changed me." Now that I've never heard anyone else use it. I mean, in one sense, I thought, oh, that's an obvious cheesy line, but no one's ever used it before. It's a great line. And not just a line. It was true. And therefore, a few guys are going to say, yeah, we're going to invest in church. Church matters. We know it matters, and we're going to be there and turn up, and we're going to be the ones who encourage others to do the same, and we're going to, be honest with one another. And of course, there's a danger someone could hear this and think, "Oh, Sonia, I haven't got half an hour to speak on the phone to a bloke every day." I am not talking about that. I don't think that works very well for blokes. But you probably, and this is where you need your spouse's buy-in. If you can go away for 36 hours with 2 or 3 others and just go for a walk somewhere, that's when blokes do their best talking, I think. If you over an activity, I caricature. I know. I'm sorry, but I think there's something to that. You're going to spur one another on, and when you talk honestly, you're going to say, "And now, how is marriage? Not as good as it should be. Of course, it isn't. Let me tell you about my most recent screw up and the thing that I did. I'm most embarrassed about, and the friendships you can get to when you get to the point where you just meet up and say, "Go on then." Confess your sins. What have you done, you idiot? What have you screwed up recently? And you laugh because you know you're a forgiven sinner. And you say, "Look, I've done this. Actually, I shouldn't laugh. It was bad." But, and on you move. And, others to spur you on. We're not meant to live this life alone in any sense, the Christian life. We need others. And just one or two others or a gang of others who some of these questions that we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or whatever, they're on the agenda. How are we doing? What do we think that looks like? Hey, what did you make? Were you dragged to see Barbie as well? What did you do?
Yeah.
And have conversations about these things. I mean, that's
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you. That's really good. And we'll be back just after these, where we'll speak a bit more with the author Matt Fuller about reclaiming masculinity. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, you can help keep it on the web. All you've got to do is buy me a coffee. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/Matt McChlery to make a donation. There is a link in this episode's show notes. So go on, buy me a coffee today and help this podcast to keep supporting Christian books and authors. Hello, welcome back. This is the Christian Book Blurb podcast. I am speaking to the author Matt Fuller about his book, Reclaiming Masculinity. Now, we did a lot of chatting about the book before the short break, and now, Matt, what we like to do on the show is to get to know our authors a little bit better. So what do you do for fun? Have you got any pastimes or hobbies or men's groups that you are a part of? What does your social life look like for you?
Well, I don't know. In that, I'm entering a whole new horizon. We're about to become empty nesters. So I don't know. I mean, this is big, Matt. I've
uncharted territory. Yeah.
Because actually, it's one of the blessings of being a parent. Actually, I've always really enjoyed Saturday mornings on the sidelines or Saturday afternoons, kids playing sport, and all these parents you get to know for years and years and years. Yeah. I'm actually going to really miss that. There's this whole world that's just going to probably blow away. After that, I'm not very interesting. I enjoy going for running. You'll probably edit this out because it'll not be helpful. I belong to a boxing club. I know that's sort of stereotypically male. It's not very helpful, is it? I've never competed, by the way. It's just training. It's just fitness. But there is something hugely enjoyable about the friendships there. I mean, it's quite local. So they call me the violent vicar because they know what I do. Not just because they think it's hilarious that I'm there sparring and training with them all. Yes. But actually, I really enjoy getting to know some of those guys and the banter. Partly it was just for me another avenue to meet people who aren't church related, who aren't Christians, and hopefully share the faith. And that's been quite fun. I've enjoyed that. Apart from that, I don't know, walking the dog.
Have you got any favourite things? Favourite movies or favourite food or anything like that?
Favourite things. I can't think of... I tell you what, a favourite thing. If I find the time to arrange with one or two mates who do the same, to go to the river, pump up our paddle boards, and spend an hour paddling in one direction...
2 hours back again.
Exactly. As the sun sets, and then you realise, oh sugar, we had the tide with us. Now it's going to be hard work. But But actually, I can't think of much more pleasant than, and I managed it once this summer so far. Of an evening with a couple of guys. You paddle down. You're slowly chatting. It's good exercise. I mean, that is blissful. I mean, but I'm asking for quite a lot there. The guys to be available, the sun to be shining, for it to be a warm evening, to not get distracted, because what you really want, you don't want to fall in, because then it ruins the whole. You don't want to fall in the Thames. Other rivers are available that may be more palatable, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's lurking in there. That'd be living the dream, I reckon.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. And you say you're a vicar? Whereabouts do you do your vicaring?
Oh, it's bonkers. So very central London, Christchurch, Mayfair. It was a derelict building until 20 years ago. Just the pigeons had claimed it. But we got permission to come in 20 odd years ago and start a little church. And God has been kind, and it's grown quite a bit since then. And but it's highly eccentric, really, that we're here, because no one lives in the immediate surroundings. So it's all restaurants and hotels and the Queen. No, she's sorry, the King. Buckingham Palace is only 10 minutes walk away.
So he's in your parish. You could go and do a parish visit.
Technically not quite, just outside.
Oh, okay, it's different rule. Oh, okay.
Yes. But it's a slightly eccentric. I mean, it would never work. It's one of those. London is a weird place, and it's sort of people travel to do anything in London. So having church centrally, when you work centrally and socialise centrally, it operates well. I'm not sure it would many other places, but it's been a hoot. It's been a hoot and a real blessing to see what God has done in 20 odd years here.
That's great, Matt. Is this your first book?
No, there are a number of others. I've written a commentary on Deuteronomy. I'm not sure many of your readers or listeners would necessarily go for a commentary. A more popular one on Amos. A few years ago, I wrote one on Be True to Yourself. Where was that? It came out in 2020, just in time for lockdown. But exploring that phenomenon. There's a sense in which it's good to be true to yourself if you're true to what God the Creator has made you to be. But the modern way of hearing that sentence, which is I'm allowed to be whatever I want to be, is actually not going to satisfy you in the slightest. I wrote a little book on justification by faith called Perfect Sinners. How does the fact that we're perfectly righteous in God's sight, and therefore he views us with the affection he has for the Lord Jesus because we're united to him, how does that relate to what we do? Can I bring God pleasure or displeasure? Does his love for me ever change? So issues that people ask quite commonly on that. And then the ironic book, which is what my wife calls Time for Everything, which is how do you juggle life and work and family and church commitments without feeling a bit overwhelmed or just guilty that you're letting people down.
So you're obviously a prolific writer then. Have you got anything you're currently working on at the moment?
No, I think prolific is Lee Child or or someone who's churning out things every other. I get a thought in my head and or someone keeps asking me a question or different people keep asking the same question. And I think, rather than repeating myself, I'm just going to get my thoughts in a straight line and say, there, read that. So I have one or two thoughts in my head, but I'm not writing anything particularly at the moment. A little break. Well, I think it's only really the summer I have any space to do it. But and this year was just too many other things going on. Yeah. A-levels. And such things. So, no. One or two things, ideas, but... I don't write for the sake of it. It's only whenever if I feel I can say something useful.
Just before we go, where can people find you and find your books? Have you got a website, or where are your books available, sort of online or in bookshops, or
Well, the best place to go is so this one is with the Good Book Company. So goodbook.com or thegoodbook.co.uk. Would take you there, and some of the others are there. I mean, if you wanted all of them, The Evil Empire, Amazon has them all. But the Good Book is the best place to go, because then Christians get the money rather than Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, okay, great. So you can find out about Matt's books in those various different places. What we'll do is we'll put a link to the Good Book Company's site on the show notes of this episode so that you can click on it and then you can see Matt Fuller's books there when you do that. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for giving of your time. Thank you for the great discussion. And thank you as well to our listeners for listening to this podcast, listening to this episode. And I hope that it's been of value to you. And do recommend it to other people you know as well. We do have an episode that comes out every couple of weeks. So do be back really soon for another episode where we'll be chatting with another Christian author about their books, their faith, and their lives. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to Christian Book Blurb with your host, Matt McChlery. Do give it a like, give it a share, and let your friends know all about it. We do hope to see you again soon on another Christian Book Blurb.